Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Monday, March 9th, 2026. The Jessica Santillan Tragedy. Lessons learned. 17-year-old Jessica Santillan's death as a result of receiving mismatched organs was a tragedy, not only for Jessica and her family, but also for her transplant surgeon, James Jaggers, for Duke Medical Center, and for the whole organ transplantation community. Her death exemplified the importance of designing systems that prevent medical error, the moral, legal, and psychosocial perplexities of dealing with medical error, the fragility of trust in healthcare institutions, and some of the dilemmas involved in organ procurement and allocation. Jessica's story. Jessica was born on 26 December 1985 in a small town near Guadalajara, Mexico, to Milico Huerta and Magdalena Santillan. Was a sick child from the moment she came home. She vomited blood on her first night, and the first night she came home, and had severe frequent headaches and vomiting as a young child. When Jessica was 5 years old, a Mexican doctor diagnosed her with anemia and prescribed her iron pills. When another doctor suggested that she might have a heart murmur, Jessica's parents took her to Victoria, Texas, where an American doctor discovered that she had restrictive cardiomyopathy, a fatal condition in which the left ventricle of the heart does not fill with enough blood to provide the body with adequate oxygen. In March 1999, the Santillas, who did not speak English, decided that they needed to go to the United States to get treatment for Jessica. Magdalena Santillan's sister, who lives in Lewisburg, North Carolina, had told the Santillas that Duke Medical Center could help. The Santillans paid $5,000 to a smuggler to move the whole family, including Jessica's brother, Ulises, and sister, Dulce, across the border. And while they were traveling through the Sonoran desert, thieves stole all of the family's money, including Jessica's earrings. When they arrived in Lewisburg, Milico obtained employment as a construction worker, and Magdalena took a job as a housekeeper for Lewisburg College. Jessica's condition continued to worsen. She developed a pulmonary hyperextension and was short of breath whenever she exerted herself. In the spring of 2000, doctors recommended that she receive a heart-lung transplant, but the family could not afford the $500,000 operation, and they did not qualify for Medicaid, giving their status as illegal immigrants. They began raising money for the operation with the help of local churches and civic groups. Mac Mahoney, a Lewisburg home builder who had read of Jessica's plight in a newspaper and befriended the family, spent tens of thousands of dollars of his own money for her heart surgeries. In August 2000, established a nonprofit foundation, Jessica's Hope Chest, to help raise money to pay for Jessica's medical bills. In May 2002, Jessica's doctors at Duke placed Jessica on a waiting list for a heart-lung transplant. On February 6, 2003, the Santillas got the call from a transplant team informing them that they had found organs for Jessica. A donor had become available through the New England Organ Bank, which ran a search on the National Registry of potential recipients and found 2 patients eligible at Duke. Jessica, one of them. The Oregon Bank contacted Carolina Donor Services, which contacted the on-call adult heart transplant surgeon, who then referred the agency to Jaggers. Since the potential recipient was a pediatric surgeon, and Jaggers was the on-call pediatric heart transplant surgeon, Jaggers concluded that the first potential recipient was not ready for surgery and asked about obtaining her heart and lungs for Jessica Santillan, referring to her by name. The agency said that it would check and call back. The agency contacted another on-call adult heart transplant surgeon and offered the organs to him. But the surgeon declined them because the size was not appropriate for his patient. Finally, the agency offered the organs to Jaggers for Jessica, and Jaggers accepted them. Lost in the exchanges was the fact that the donor had type A blood. Jessica was O positive. Jaggers cannot recall any discussion of the ABO compatibility with the agency. He assumed, and federal investigators also made an unannounced visit to Duke to examine its compliance with regulations, governed acute care, and laboratory services. Duke's analysis indicated that a lack of redundancy was a key organizational factor in the error, and Duke made several changes to its organ transplantation procedures to prevent such mistakes. Under its new procedures, the transplant surgeon, the transplant coordinator, and the procuring surgeon will each validate ABO compatibility and some other key data. Duke also promised to correct the error by attempting to acquire a new heart and lungs for Jessica. Duke had placed Jessica on organ donation list as soon as it had learned about the mistake, although her odds for receiving a second set of organs quickly enough were very low. Only 28 people received heart-lung transplants in the United States in 2002, while about 200 were on the national waiting list. The hospital had asked the Santillan's and Mahoney not to say anything to the media about the medical error while it attempted to acquire new organs. The family initially agreed, but Mahoney was concerned that Duke was not trying hard enough to find new organs, and without informing Duke, he assumed that the organs were compatible because the agency had offered them to him. Carolina Donor Services admits that it did not know Jessica's blood type before it released the organs to Jagger. Magdalena Santillan said the Duke doctors that murdered Jessica, she did not want them to murder anyone else. At 9 a.m. on February 7th, Duke surgeons chartered a jet from Raleigh North Carolina to Boston, Massachusetts. They left Boston at 3:15 p.m. After a delay caused by snowstorm and returned to Raleigh at 5:49. Jaggers removed Jessica's heart and lungs when the organs arrived from Boston. He did not perform the ABO type testing before transplanting the organs, since he assumed that they matched. The organs functioned well for 30 to 40 minutes after Jessica was taken off the heart-lung bypass machine. But their function deteriorated quickly as her immune system and started attacking them. Within minutes, Duke's clinical transplant immunology laboratory reported the organs and the recipient were ABO incompatible. Jaggers admitted his mistake to the Santians and Mahoney 1 hour after the surgery. According to Mahoney, Jaggers said Duke didn't make the mistake. I did. Then he wept. After the surgery, Duke conducted a root cause analysis of the tragedy and its own organ procurement process. Began talking to reporters in hopes that the media attention would encourage people to donate organs and improve Jessica's chances for a second transplant. He told the press that Duke had made a mistake and was dragging his feet in correcting. The mistake and was trying to keep him from talking to the press. Duke spokesperson twice stated that they would neither confirm nor deny the allegations. On February 16th, the New England Donor Bank said that the organs it had sent to Duke were clearly marked Type A. The Duke spokesperson did not comment on the implications of this statement. Finally, on 17 February, 10 days after the tragedy, Duke's executive officer, William Fulkerson, accepted responsibility for Duke's role in the case, though he did not admit that Duke had made an error. On February 19, Duke released a public statement from Jaggers, in which he admitted his mistake. To date, Jaggers has declined to talk to the press about the case. Jaggers, who comes from a ranching family in the small town of Alliance, Nebraska, won a full scholarship to Chadron State College, attended medical school at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and underwent residency training at Oregon Health Sciences University and the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center, and had a fellowship in congenital heart surgery at the Children's Hospital in Denver, Colorado. Colleagues have described him as an outstanding cardiothoracic surgeon, a world-class congenital heart surgeon, a hero, and humanitarian. Each year, he spends several weeks in Nicaragua performing free surgery on children with heart disease for the charity Variety Children's Lifeline. He continues to see patients at Duke. On February 20th, the improbable happened. Duke procured a new set of organs for Jessica. Mahoney had urged donors to make a directed donation to Jessica. But the new organs came through normal channels. Duke physicians, including Jaggers, performed a second operation. Her body appeared to tolerate the second set of organs. On that same day, Duke officials tried to stop Mahoney from holding his own press conference in the university auditorium. They tried to cut him off while he was speaking. Mahoney once again accused Duke of trying to cover up the mistake and trying to keep him from talking to the media. On 21 February, Jessica developed brain swelling and intracranial bleeding. Duke's spokesperson announced that Jessica had suffered a severe and irreversible brain injury. During a heart-lung transplant, the patient's blood circulates through a heart-lung machine. Anticoagulant drugs used to prevent clotting in the machine increase the risk of bleeding in or around the brain. At this point, Duke asked for an ethics committee consultation, which sent a two-person team on fact-finding mission. Mahoney once again blamed Duke for the problem. Arguing that the hospital lost valuable time it needed to procure a second set of organs, failing to admit its mistake early in the process, asking the Santians not to talk to the media. Duke physicians later admitted that Jessica had suffered a mild neurological injury after the first transplant, which they had believed to be reversible. On 22 February at 1:25 p.m., Duke physicians determined that Jessica had died. Although her body was still being kept alive through life support, an electroencephalogram indicated no brain activity, and a perfusion scan showed no blood flow to the brain. 2 neurological exams also confirmed the diagnosis of brain death. Duke physicians, along with 3 interpreters and a priest, broke the bad news to the Santians. By now, however, the Santians did not trust the physicians, and Magdalena Santillan did not believe that her daughter had died. The Santians gave the doctor a copy of a document that had signed earlier, which stated that they did not want life support discontinued without their permission. The doctors explained that the document applied only to patients in a coma or vegetative state, not to patients who are brain dead. Under North Carolina law, physicians do not have a legal obligation to continue treating a patient who has been declared brain dead. Mahoney, whom the Santinians had given legal authority to make decisions for Jessica, requested a second opinion from a doctor outside the Duke system. She was taken off the ventilator support 3 minutes later. The doctors from Duke asked the Santillan several times to consider donating Jessica's organs. Magdalena Santillan became angry and asked that the doctors had murdered Jessica and that she did not want them to murder anyone else. According to Carolina Donor Services, although some of Jessica's organs had been damaged, her cornea, skin, bones, and heart valves remained viable for donation. Mahoney contended, however, that he had inquired about donating Jessica's organs, and that the doctors had told him that her organs would not be suitable for transplantation because they had quit functioning or were too saturated with anti-rejection medications. For Santillan's requested that Jessica's bodies be sent to the state medical examiner's office for autopsy. The Santillans have hired an attorney, Kurt Dixon, to represent them in a medical malpractice litigation. Although Jagger has admitted his fault, since he is an independent contractor and not an employee or agent of Duke, his negligence would not implicate Duke under the doctrine of vicarious liability. To go after the Duke's deep pockets, Dixon will need to argue that Duke was negligent. So far, Duke has accepted responsibility in the mishap, but has not admitted that it made an error. For the last few years, Duke had asked patients to sign mandatory arbitration agreements as a condition of providing care. These agreements require patients to submit their claims against the hospital to an arbitrator instead of taking them to court. As of this writing, information about any arbitration agreement between the Santillans and Duke was not publicly available. If the Santillans had assigned such an argument, they would need to show that the contract was invalid before they continued to pursue malpractice litigation. On 27 February, the House Energy and Commerce Committee heard testimony from Dixon against a $250,000 cap on non-economic damages. In medical malpractice lawsuits. On March 26, the Joint Commission of Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations found fault with Duke's organ transplantation procedures and downgraded the hospital to accreditation with requirements for approvement. Lessons. If there's anything good that comes out of Jessica's death, it is an opportunity for healthcare providers and organizations to learn or relearn some important lessons. Some of these lessons are so obvious that they would be apparent to an 8th grade biology student. Others are more subtle and vexing. The main obvious lesson is that the healthcare providers and organizations need to do a better job at building systems that will reduce the risk of medical error and improve patient safety. The error that occurred was analogous to amputating the wrong limb. It does not take years of medical training to understand the fundamental mistake. Of ABO incompatibility. Duke's organ transplantation procedures depended on surgeons and organ procurement agencies not making much mistakes. But any procedure that depends on human imperfection